19. The esteemed, the possibly most excellent autist that we're going to cover in this series, Trym the Troll.
Bork, bork, bork. Yes, we're covering today. We're covering one of the most elusive and kind of one of the most elusive and iconic artists of the 21st century. Although he far exists, he pre-exists the 21st century as far as we know. So we'll jump in here. So what we'll do is we'll start off with our normal art history timeline here. So we can see that he exists as he from his first contact, to now. He crosses many barriers and boundaries in art history, and kind of precedes many of the modern movements. So we don't have a solid date for Trym's entry into the art world. Rumors abound of the elusive artist from accounts that going all the way back to the 1700s, although none can be confirmed, until he first revealed himself to the Norwegian public in the early 1900s. And he would end up dropping in and out of contact from there, but his work always displayed the same kind of moderately tribal, sort of abstract realism that we've all come to know and love. And is one of the most profound artists of the last 200 years. Scholars often debate the origins or intentions of his style, whether it be his abstract realist landscapes or his portraiture of his numerous mythical encounters with friends and his friends. His work is a true reflection of the old world technique and sensibility, mixed with modern culture and a finger uniquely on the line between our real world and his mythical milieu. Trym's timeline resists the conventions of human art history, and whether this is due to longevity, evasion, or refusal is a matter of many a scholarly debate. So, with that being said, we understand his kind of place in the timeline. We're going to jump in and talk about the artist himself. So, the mythic and elusive artist known as Trym the Troll was discovered in the deep forests of Norway. His exact date of birth has been lost to the ages, and it's not known if he even has parents, as there's been no others of his kind found, making him presumably one of the oldest artists in Norway and perhaps all of Europe. In his early days, Trym is said to have spent the majority of his time scavenging for food, a necessity that shaped not only his daily routines but a long-term physical appearance. But his long-term physical appearance and temperament. The fjords provided a consistent and fiercely contested source of sustenance. Fish, particularly those trapped in shallow or left unattended near human dwellings, formed the core of his diet. So,
would that include, certain fish that were found now in cans predominantly?
Perhaps, yeah. There is tinned fish in his world for sure. So access to these resources, however, was rarely uncontested. He frequently complained about having to engage in repeated skirmishes with the local house cats. And these animals, well-fed and territorial and far more socially acceptable than Trym was, were often faster to claim the best catches. And accounts describe these encounters as tactical rather than violent, involving feints, patience, and strategic withdrawals, as you would expect from a mythical being.
Indeed.
and go ahead.
It does, though, beg the question: which was the superior hunter, or was Trym more of a scavenger?
See, I think it falls between a bit of both. Like his tactics seem to have been not necessarily scavenger-like, but more, more well thought out. So, let's see. Skip the next picture here. So Trym has always maintained that the cats knew what they were doing and acted with intent, and I think he may have had a better tune in on the cats than other people did. And so
Hmm.
this period is often cited as an early influence on his views regarding hierarchy, entitlement, and the arbitrary nature of ownership. Um, Dietary records are predictably informal, but scholars broadly agree that Trym's seafood heavy intake, rich in fish oils and carotenoids, contributed to his distinctive ginger hair and beard. Comparisons are frequently drawn to flamingos and their diet. That's how they get their color. They think that Trym's, high fish diet gave him his color. And Trym
That
himself,
makes sense.
yeah, so Trym himself appeared aware of this parallel and embraced it with his characteristic bluntness. Beta carotene is life is one of his reportedly common refrains while he was tracking the fish. Um, Repeated and often enough suggests either conviction or just self-justification. But beyond its physiological effects, the diet reinforced Trym's close association with the fjords themselves. The fish appear repeatedly in his early imagery, not really as symbols of abundance, but as objects of pursuit, loss, and negotiation. And their presence underscores a recurring theme in his work: the survival as an ongoing, contested process rather than a settled condition. So we're going to move on. So this is a picture of Trym with his friend, the Pukwudgie. Throughout his years in the northern forest, he was not entirely alone. He and many of his forest companions spent considerable time avoiding both human settlements and the wolves that roamed freely throughout the region. Got a picture for that. Um,
I mean, yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
yeah, survival depended less on strength than really on discretion. So, and among Trym's most enduring associations was the Pukwudgie, uh, who again we have pictured here, um, and who was a mythic forest spirit venerated among several indigenous tribes. And scholars have noted the repeated appearance of Pukwudgie in his work, often rendered with an unusual detail and restraint. And this consistency and the absence of real character in there, the care that he put into the images, it strongly suggests familiarity rather than just something he made up. So it lends more credibility to the existence of these creatures that remained hidden from the majority of us.
Hmm.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. I really do have to wonder. Was he truly in isolation, or maybe he was living amongst one of these isolated Pukwudgie communities?
see, that is often a hotly contested issue because, I believe that Trym himself has been quoted as saying that he spent a lot of time in isolation, not necessarily in communities. And I think that more his relationship, or not relationship, but his his contact with them was more tangential. They were just part of the forest too, and he did befriend a few of them, obviously.
Hmm.
Yeah. So again, back to the wolves, they posed a consistent immediate threat to many of the forest dwellers there. And here we have a rendering of Trym fleeing the wolves. Uh, but Trym, they always avoided direct confrontation and instead relying on concealment and flight. And it was during this period that he refined his ability to observe silently for extended durations. And art historians have later linked these habits to the persistent themes of tension, anticipation, and suspended actions that recur throughout his mature works.
Hmm.
Yeah. On one such period of prolonged observation, Trym encountered a large black dragon. Rather than interpreting the creature as hostile, he later described as him as perceiving intelligence and wisdom, uh, and restraint from its glowing red eyes. And from this, he inferred that the dragon must have a caretaker, reasoning that such a presence, could not belong to an ordinary mortal. So one day, he
Hmm.
followed the dragon deeper into the fjord lands, where he discovered a particularly rich natural source of charcoal. And this material would later be used in several of his most iconic early portraits, and it remains central to discussions of his technical development. While tracking the dragon at this time, Trym, he identified the caretaker. It was Yiz the White, a prophetess whose influence would prove subtle but lasting. And Yiz is widely regarded as a formative presence in Trym's understanding of guardianship, integrity, and authority exercised without justification or spectacle. But taken together, these encounters complicate efforts to categorize Trym's early work as purely mythic or symbolic. The consistency of form, and posture, and behavioral detail across his depictions strongly indicate direct observation. And his earliest paintings function less as fantasy and more as field documentation, and records of his coexistence with an environment that demanded constant awareness, and really brought him to where he is now.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I do have to wonder if there is some vivisection as part of his early activities. That way he could know how the anatomy truly functions, or is that just a offshoot of ingesting that much fish?
See, I think obviously he learned musculature and many things from not just consuming fish, but watching them swim, and then watching the wolves run, and watching humans at a distance, and of course watching his friends and everything else. His vicarious nature really helped to fuel a lot of his creative endeavors. So, with that, we're going to move on to Trym's period of first contact. So, Trym's first sustained contact with human civilization occurred in the northern Fjordlands of Norway, where forestry scouts began reporting the repeated discovery of unusually detailed and technically competent works of art hidden deep in the woods. These works appeared without signature, explanation, or pattern of distribution, making their origin very difficult to discern. And of course, that's really a hallmark of a lot of his early work too, is that he would work again in isolation and without a whole lot of like we fail to understand most of his reasoning now, other than just the pure expression of his artistic talent.
Hmm.
So after several months of investigation, an expedition was formally commissioned by the United Norwegian Forest Unified Certification Commissar to locate the source of the works, because he was so enamored with them, and determine whether their creator posed any actual risk to forestry operations. So the UNFUC, which is what that company was called later on, or the abbreviation
Well,
of
the
it,
acronym, yeah.
the acronym, yeah, the initialization of it, or whatever. The UNFUC enlisted the assistance of one of the era's most experienced and unconventional explorers, a hardy Australian known simply as Bezic.
Yeah, I've heard that Bezic was an expert in diving into the bush.
he often went deep into the dark bush. A big fan of the bush, because that's a thing in Australia. Yeah. So by this point, Bezic's reputation was already well established, and we've read about him in the history books now. I know you were taught in school about him. I was taught in school about him.
Indeed,
And,
yeah.
The amazing accomplishments and discoveries that he made. One of the most prominent ones was he'd previously led an expedition into the remote regions of inner Australia, and that's where he single-handedly negotiated a peace treaty with the Huntsman tribe. And the agreement allowed for mutual coexistence in exchange for the tribe's specialized services in removal of unwanted pests within their territory. And the solution was later described as unorthodox but extremely effective.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, and it might just be a little apocryphal tale, but wasn't there something involving exchange of gasoline and plastic bags for getting to this level of the negotiation?
Well, see, that happened along the way. The Huntsman tribe was not actually they were gate kept by the Aboriginal people, at that time. And so much like
Oh,
early
okay.
explorers traded, blankets and alcohol to the Native Americans, in Australia, it's really traditional or typical back then. It was to give the natives, they trade them petrol in a plastic bag because
Hmm.
you know, and sticks. They liked sticks too. So
Ah, okay.
yeah,
Okay.
and upon locating Trym, Bezic quickly recognized the significance of his work, and he expressed a particular admiration for Trym's portraiture, especially his renderings of mythic figures such as the Pukwudgie and the Black Dragon tended by Yiz the White. What began as really a cautious encounter soon developed into a genuine friendship, marking Trym's first voluntary connection to the wider world, which was also lauded as one of Bezik's great achievements as well. So,
Hmm.
Bezik's account of the elusive troll artist spread rapidly among political leaders, scholars, and nobility at the time. And within a year of his emergence from the wilderness, Trym was granted an audience with the Viking Jarl of Norway, an honor extended to very few, and the Jarl praised both Trym's artistic mastery and his evident devotion to the Norwegian fjords themselves. But despite his early recognition, Trym's broader acceptance within the established art world was kind of slow. Uh, Scholars acknowledged his genius almost immediately, but institutions struggled with the visceral intensity of his work and the implications of an artist who had developed entirely outside of accepted traditions. So, and really, in the end, his arrival was not just merely a revelation to the art world; it was a really dramatic disruption to the art world. It really kind of set scholars on edge and did a big shake up.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, and
Interesting.
following this, he went on to have, quite a bit of global fame. So following his initial emergence, uh, he did not integrate directly into public life. Instead, he returned to his cave above the northern fjords, where he remained largely inaccessible to people. Contact with the outside world was sporadic and mediated almost entirely through Bezic, while Trym continued to work in isolation, which is an interesting theme because, of course, we've talked about so many artists who've had business partners and whose wives or whatever. Not to imply any sort of relationship like that, but we've talked about many artists who have had like managers and stuff like that to help them uh, handle their art without having to be entirely um, without having to be entirely involved and hassled by the art world. So this period of withdrawal lasted until the appearance of what is now widely regarded as his first true breakthrough piece, the Chad Beholder, which is one of the paintings we'll talk about later. Uh, the work's unapologetic intensity and technical confidence attracted the attention of scholars far beyond Scandinavia. And it circulated rapidly through collectors, critics, and eventually reaching Hollywood and the broader American art world. So, and by the early 1950s, Trym's reputation had expanded internationally, despite his continued absence, largely through the work of Bezic. And in recognition of his cultural significance, the Queen of Norway formally requested his presence at court, and of course Trym complied.
As
Briefly,
one does.
yeah, he showed up briefly, and he was awarded a silvered tin of canned herring, which is widely regarded as Norway's highest honor. And contemporary observers noted that he accepted the award with sincerity, if a little bit of visible discomfort at the situation. But fame, how it proved ill-suited to Trym's temperament. The attention of the 50s art world and its institutions, expectations, and publicity kind of overwhelmed him. And as we've covered in previous episodes, with artists like, you know, like Dolly and Hopper and even Wyeth. They had really big periods in the 50s around there. Hell, even Frazetta had big periods in the 50s. So it was a very tumultuous
Mhm.
time in the art world. And shortly after his audience with the Queen, he withdrew once again to his cave overlooking the fjords, where he would remain for several more years.
Now, my understanding is that he had some sort of uh, altercation with Jackson Pollock simply because he thought the man was actually a fish
I
because of the name Pollock.
and
It's a strange rumor, but
Yeah, I think it's unconfirmed, but it's kind of a colloquial tale. Like people understand it because it makes perfect sense, especially with his struggles with integrating into the art world and really his intolerance for pretentious douchebaggery in the first place. So that was really his hang up with Pollock, and it plays off of the fish thing, but it really is because Jackson Pollock was an untalented dildo. Um,
okay. I'm glad we cleared that up. Yeah,
yeah,
because the sources I'd been looking at, yeah, were kind of vague. So
yeah,
this
it's
is an excellent drill down on the true facts of what happened.
you have to dig in on it really sometimes. But so during his extended period of exclusion, he refined his craft, uh, producing work selectively and without regard for market demand, and his public appearances ceased entirely. And that's and the responsibility for managing his affairs fell almost exclusively to Bezic. Although Trym's personal needs were very little because he lived in a cave above the fjords. Um, you know, he was producing art, and Bezic really worked to amplify and boost his profile in the world. So, and in doing this, Bezic really demonstrated that his talents extended far beyond exploration, and he proved to be a shrewd negotiator with a keen eye for art, carefully curating Trym's limited exposure while preserving the artist's autonomy. And under Bezik's stewardship, Trym's absence really only deepened the mystique the mystique surrounding him, um,
Hmm.
which of course only makes him more popular. But you know, closer to the late '60s, he was actually granted an audience with President Richard Nixon, and the accounts describe that meeting as informal and unexpectedly warm. They ended up getting along really well. Uh, and they became fast friends, and it was a friendship that lasted quite a while, until, you know, of course, until Nixon's passing. Trym actually was at Nixon's funeral, and although he was requested to speak, he did not because he didn't feel like he could pay his friend enough respect for it. So while they were visiting, this is an interesting anecdote here. They became friends, obviously, and during the visit, Nixon showed Trym the button, and they jokingly discussed plans to nuke Canada, just jokingly, and 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 short, you know, like they're like, "Hey, we're gonna press it, we're gonna press it, we're gonna do it," and you can see by this image, Trym's about to press the button, and then they're like, "Ah, just kidding," but and a moment later, and it was dismissed by all parties as humor, though not without lingering concern among the staff. They were kind of, you know, they were kind of a little off
I
put
can
by it.
understand. Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, he just met this guy, and you know, half an hour later, they're threatening to nuke Canada. So it was apparently a very amiable relationship, but it really would not compare to some of his other impacts on modern world. So by the 1970s, following the widespread discussion of his meeting with Nixon, Trym really had become an object of fascination beyond the traditional art world. And his continued absence, combined with the growing legend of his influence, attracted attention from several Hollywood studios seeking unconventional consultants. But most inquiries were declined or ignored. However, there was one figure who proved unusually persistent, and it was George Lucas, of all people, actually. Lucas, he was then developing a very ambitious science fiction project and was actively seeking new visual languages and non-traditional cultural models. And Trym's work, particularly his depictions of forest-dwelling societies and ritual behavior and non-hierarchical communities, provided Lucas with what he later described as a missing perspective. Um,
Now, see, I've heard a lot of rumors that the Wookiees, as well as the Ewoks, were based on photographs of Trym at various points in his life. Yeah, the older being more of an Ewok style, and the young cub-like Ewok was kind of the result of a infant picture of Trym that was in his wallet when he was talking with Lucas.
oh, that I didn't catch that, but that makes perfect sense. And of course, we've seen some. We don't have too many images of his youth, and I was not able to find them. But I guess, but scholars certainly would probably agree with you on that. But not everybody was really. They thought Trym was going to do it, because he'd been asked so many times. But really, against expectations, he definitely agreed to consult. And his involvement was informal and largely undocumented, maintaining his kind of elusive status. He didn't want to be in the credits. But contemporaries describe him as one of Lucas's most trusted external advisors during this period. And his insights into forest peoples and communal survival and mythical non-human creatures and cultures provide pivotal in shaping several of the foundational elements of the project that would become Star Wars. So he was actually on the ground floor, and most of what we recognize as uniquely Star Wars now really came from Trym. So, and Lucas later summarized Trym's influence like really succinctly. He says, without Trym, there'd be no Ewoks, there would be no Wookiees, there'd be no Jar Jar, and there definitely would have never been a Christmas special.
Oh man, we have to thank Trym for a lot of the best of Star Wars, don't we?
Absolutely. Yeah, the Star Wars we all love and all the toys that we loved as kids were largely a result of Trym's influence. So, and sometimes that statement is quoted from Lucas with irony, but it's generally accepted by scholars as 100% accurate. His influence was that important on the Star Wars universe. And his experimental ideas, many of which were considered impractical or excessive at the time, are frequently cited as the conceptual origin of what would later be known as the Green Boot Goblin, a figure whose legacy remains contentious but influential. So, following this period of cultural influence, Trym once again, he withdrew once again from public collaboration, and it was during this renewed isolation that here's the image of Trym playing his horn for Lucas to help further. This is one of the things that helped inspire that goblin as well, with his trademark horn. There we go. So following this period of cultural influence, he withdrew from public collaboration. During this time, in his renewed isolation, that he produced what is now regarded as his magnum opus, and that is the Life Day celebration image. And here I have a picture of him making a copy of it. This is not the original. This is just a copy. He produced several copies of it, which again we'll talk about later. And this work has been cited across discipline as one of the defining masterpieces of the 20th century, praised for its ambition, its density, and complete disregard for its restraint. And its influence, it really remains difficult to quantify in society, and although its presence is unmistakable.
Really, possibly one of his finest works.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, and we all know the cultural significance of this painting, especially to Americans. It's really, it's something that really speaks to the American soul, and his and the fact that it came from a Norwegian artist is really an interesting take. So, moving on from that, writing the momentum of his association with Star Wars, he entered a period of renewed creative intensity. And rather than pursuing further public collaborations, he returned once again to his cave overlooking the fjords. And you can see this is a beautiful cave. And this is where he turned his attention to a new and unexpected discipline, and that's cooking. And what really began as a necessity, you know, just catching fish and eating them. But now that he'd got a little fame and fortune, he could afford to step up his game, as it were. And having, you know, so much time and experience with fish, it really transitioned him. He transitioned really easily into cooking. And so it turned into an obsession, and he spent years preparing meals, often with limited ingredients and uncompromising standards. Awakened what contemporaries later described as a visible transformation in him. Observers noted a marked change in his demeanor, with a renewed vitality and evident in his expression and an intensity that appeared to glow from his eyes. Cooking for Trym was not just a diversion, but an extension of another medium through which he could control patience and intention, or another medium through which control, patience, and intention could be exercised. And also, during this period, he developed several signature dishes, many of which we know and taken advantage of today, and just without realizing it. And his most notable recipe is his proprietary recipe for herring and mac, a dish that would go on to really become a staple of Scandinavian kids' childhoods for years. Though simple in appearance, the dish reflects many of the same principles present in his visual work: restraint, balance, and an unapologetic embrace of local tradition. So, despite his continued seclusion, he did not disappear entirely from the world stage. And in 2024, he presented a copy of his magnum opus, the Life Day celebration, to the Sultan of the newly established Caliphate of the UK. And in recognition of his gesture, Trym was awarded the Golden Goat, which is the highest honor bestowed by the state of New Londonistan.
I'll be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. And following that ceremony, he declined all further public appearances after that. And so today, he continues to live and work in relative isolation, producing modern masterpieces on his own terms. And his whereabouts remain intentionally vague. And his output is irregular but significant. Scholars agree on one point, and that's Trym's refusal to participate fully in the world has not diminished his influence, and in fact, it has helped ensure it. And they've also been quoted as saying that Trym does not belong to history, and that history just occasionally manages to keep up with him.
That is profound and very accurate.
Yeah, I believe so too. You know, I mean, there's a lasting influence on this artist, and you know, much like Hopper and his subtle influence in culture that you don't quite realize at first. You know, of course, these works are very similar. So with that being said, we'll actually move on to our first painting here, and this is his the famed portrait of his friend the Pukwudgie. So this is charcoal on a slab of ash. It's rather large. It's 30 inches by 80 inches, and it's currently on loan to the National Heritage Museum of Norway. But it's soon to be auctioned off at Sotheby's. Well, it's expected to fetch well over $10 million, and could go even higher. You know, it depends on. Of course, there's a little bit of shakeup in the global economy now, but art is one of those things that always maintains value. So this could go up for up to 50, but we'll see. But the bidding is expected to be around 10. And so, of course, this is a portrait of the Pukwudgie he created during his pre-contact period, prior to any real sustained interaction with humans.
Now, I do have a kind of a technical question.
Mm-hmm.
What was Trym colorblind prior to his first contact?
No, he just couldn't see very well. No.
Okay.
Oh. But of course, this is widely regarded as one of the most intimate works of his early life, and it stands as a rare example of portraiture rooted entirely in a lived coexistence rather than a mythic invention. And it's the depiction, the Pukwudgie depicted here, it's not romanticized, and the figure is rendered with anatomical specificity and emotional restraint. He's crouched in a posture that suggests vigilance rather than a threat. The bow is held loosely, of course, mid-preparation, and it's really reinforcing the reoccurring theme in Trym's early work, and that's action suspended and intention unresolved. And this is executed in charcoal on a plank of ash wood, and the material was sourced locally. And the drawing exploits the grain of the surface to amplify the tension of the figure's musculature and posture. And the choice of ash is considered deliberate by scholars, both because of its durability and its symbolic association with endurance and memory. And the scale of the work, which is unusually wide for a charcoal drawing, it really forces the viewer to engage with the figure laterally. Mirroring the way such beings were encountered in the forest, are never really head on and never fully revealed to you. So, though this was created before Trym's emergence into the human world, the image has been reproduced several times throughout his life, and the later reproductions are generally understood not as copies for dissemination, but as acts of tribute to his friend the Pukwudgie. And each iteration shows a subtle variation, as you would expect, suggesting that he's really pulling these images from memory and rather than just replicating a previously existing image. Yeah. So
Interesting.
scholars have long noted that this work complicates attempts to categorize Trym's early output as purely symbolic, because the consistency in form and the posture and behavioral cues strongly indicate direct observation rather than fantasy. And the portrait functions as documentation, an acknowledgement of companionship with an environment defined by mutual caution. And so with its forthcoming auction at Sotheby's, Portrait of the Pukwudgie is expected to draw international attention and significant bids. Like I said previously, it could go up to 50 million. But despite this, its importance lies less in the market valuation than what it reveals about Trym's earliest relationships. They're grounded, respectful, and defined by survival rather than spectacle. And in a summation of this work, scholars have often said this is not a monster, it's a neighbor. Really putting a fine point on his relationship with the Pukwudgie. So, with that, we'll actually move on to the next one too, and this is the Black Dragon of Yiz the White. And this is yet another pre-contact piece. And as we can see, he really did capture the image or the essence of the dragon. And this was originally done on charcoal on stone, and it's currently residing in a private collection. It's not as big as the Pukwudgie, but it does have similar dimensions. Of course, a rather large stone like that, even for a muscular troll, is hard to carry around. So it doesn't move around a lot. And the work depicts the black dragon associated with Yiz the White, and it is believed to have been executed during his pre-contact period, of course, prior to any sustained interaction with human civilization. And though all, smaller in scale than the Pukwudgie, the drawing nonetheless exhibits the same compositional confidence and observational precision that defined Trym's earliest works. And see, the dragon is rendered in repose rather than action, and its posture, coiled, grounded, and watchful, really conveys restraint rather than menace. The single illuminated eye, the only element to break the monochrome field, functions as both a focal point and a warning. The creature is aware of the viewer, but is really unconcerned by them, as you can see. And unlike later dragon imagery common to mythic traditions, this figure is not idealized. The anatomy is dense and practical, emphasizing weight and musculature and permanence, really. The wings are folded, the claws rest naturally, and the environment presses inward, suggesting containment rather than dominion. So the original work's whereabouts are unknown. Like I said, it resides in a private collection and has not been publicly exhibited for many, many years. And that absence has led to persistent speculation that the piece may actually now be in the possession of Yiz the White herself, a claim that has neither been confirmed nor denied by either party. And, you know, as is frequently the case with high-value artworks, the owner or the provenance of it is, if it's in a private collection, it's generally not advertised. And there's a good reason for that, because if you tell somebody that you have this super, you have this super valuable piece of art, it just increases the likelihood of it being stolen from you.
Oh, yeah. There's no telling the lengths that people would go to get this piece.
Absolutely. But the image most widely circulated today is just a photograph that was taken by Bezic shortly after his initial meeting with Trym. And the photograph was actually later presented to the Jarl of Norway and is widely regarded as the motivating factor behind the Jarl's decision to grant Trym an audience. And the work's quiet authority, combined with its implication of forces beyond human governments, really made a lasting impression on the Jarl. And as with much of Trym's early output, his drawing really resists symbolic interpretation. And the consistency of anatomical detail and behavioral cues strongly suggest direct observation. So again, not something that he has envisioned, but something that he's actually witnessed and is putting down as a permanent medium. And it really, again, scholars are quoted on this one. This is much with his early output. Sorry. Sorry. I lost my place. So rather than myth making, the work reads as documentation of a record of coexistence with something ancient, powerful, and just fundamentally uninterested in human affairs. And scholars have often been quoted as saying, the dragon does not threaten, it endures, which is really, I think a foundational statement for a piece like this. Just really amazing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. and it really does speak to that level of intensity that Trym was able to capture in a moment like this.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, we're actually going to move on to his breakthrough piece, the Chad Beholder. So this is a charcoal and oil pastel, and it actually measures. It's a pretty large painting. It's 1 meter by 2.5 meters, which is about 3 feet by what is that? Almost 7 feet. So it's rather large, and it's widely regarded as his breakthrough work, and the piece that irreversibly altered his standing within the global art world. The image presents a beholder, long considered a creature contained to the realm of fantasy, not as an abstract monster or character, but as a fully realized being, rendered with anatomical intent and compositional authority. So in stark contrast to conventional depictions, Trym rejected the familiar soft spherical form, and instead, the beholder is portrayed as a svelte, structurally coherent figure defined by tension, musculature, and a pronounced, almost heroic jawline. And the creature's multiple eyes, they don't float passively. They assert presence, agency, and awareness. And the central eye dominates the composition, unblinking and confrontational. The work's dramatic illumination, rendered through stark beams of light cutting across the space, serves a dual purpose. So visually, it structures the composition and draws the viewer's attention inward, but conceptually, it reveals revelation, the exposure of hidden truths, of concealed knowledge, and most notably, the beholder's secret library, partially suggested that the edges of the frame. Knowledge here, it's not symbolic, it's guarded by the beholder.
Ooh.
Which, we would expect.
Indeed.
And because it was so large, it was executed at a near life scale. The painting forces physical engagement when you see it in person. You don't, the viewer doesn't observe the beholder, they encounter it. The mixed medium of charcoal and oil pastels, it allowed Trym to balance precision with immediacy, producing surfaces that feel both deliberate and raw. And this work now, interestingly enough, is currently the subject of an intense bidding war between the National Gallery and the Museum of Modern Art, National Gallery of London, I should say, and the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Both institutions have actually petitioned their respecting government bodies for expanded acquisition funds. And the institutional urgency reflects the painting's perceived historical importance. So
Interesting.
yeah, go ahead.
Is there any known outcome in the future, or is this still so fresh and urgent that we don't have any additional information? I've heard there's been some escalating tensions between both countries over this.
Yeah. It's undoubted that this kind of thing underpins the international tensions that we're having between the UK and the United States right now. This is it's very symbolic of that. Both countries are pulling out all the stops to really get this peace. Of course, this battle has been ongoing for several years. And it's not known, of course, with the global uncertainty and stuff, it's not known when that will be resolved. So critically, this painting, A Chad Beholder, has been compared often controversially to work of realist painters like Eugene Delacroix. Not for stylistic similarity, really, but for its willingness to assert the realness of its subject through conviction and execution. And as with Trym's earlier works, scholars remain divided on whether the painting represents fantasy or portraiture. But of course, he himself has said it was a portrait. And those guys are, of course, some scholars are just unwilling to believe in the fantastical nature of the world, especially the fantastical nature of the world as Trym presented it. So, but Bezic, primarily, and many others, they've consistently maintained that the work is not imaginative invention, but direct observation, like many of his other works. And Bez is quoted in regards to the work is that you don't invent something that looks back at you like that. Obviously speaking to the observation of it. And while that debate remains unsolved, what is no longer disputed is the work's impact. And few paintings in the 20th century have so forcefully challenged the boundary between myth and reality, or compelled institutions to really reconsider what realism actually is and what it can mean. Okay, and with that, we're actually going to move on to one of his more interesting, and this is a later piece. This is actually from last year, and
so he's been more active then.
Yeah, this is part of his output from more recent output, and this is this represents his step more into a sci-fi kind of world. And this one's called The Hate Monger. It's 45 by 80 on an oil on canvas, and it's currently held in a private collection in Germany. So, like I said, this is from sci-fi, from fantasy or realism to sci-fi. Hate Monger represents a significant departure from Trym's earliest or his earlier forest-bound and mythic subject matter, marking his almost explicit engagement with science fiction as a contemporary visual language. While stylistically distinct, the work retains the core traits that define his practice: directness, physicality, and the insistence on presence. And the painting depicts the battle-hardened warrior known as Hate Monger, mid-assault, smashing through enemy defenses with overwhelming force. And the figure dominates the composition, viewed from a low angle that exaggerates the mass and momentum. The compressed framing, damn cats. Cats knocked out my screen. Okay. Let me find it in here. Okay, the compressed framing and inward curving form suggests inevitability rather than chaos. Destruction here, it's methodical, it's not frantic. And although formally a tribute to the modern animated series Space King, this painting functions simultaneously as a political response. Art historians widely interpret Hate Monger as Trym's reaction to the rising geopolitical tensions surrounding the establishment of the UK Caliphate and the widely reported executions that followed. And in this context, the work reads less as an homage and more as a counter statement. And the timing of this work is critical. It was created after Trym's ceremonial gifting of the Life Day celebration to the Sultan of the UK. And Hate Monger, this work, has been described by scholars as a corrective gesture, an expression of unease, resistance, or internal contradiction. And where Life Day emphasizes ritual endurance and uneasy coexistence, Hate Monger really embraces the rupture. And the figure's armor bears prolonged signs of conflict. The surfaces are scarred, edges dulled, and the weapon appears improvised, but of course we know it's not. This is the Hate Mace. It's a very ceremonial weapon. And there is no triumph in the composition, only momentum, as with many of Trym's subject. The warrior is not necessarily glorified as much as he is observed in the moment where restraint has already failed. So he's not conquering, he's moving forward and smashing through, which, like I said, like they've said, it's a counter statement to the gifting of the other painting.
Well,
So
I've always had the interpretation that it was a direct reflection of what he thought was a betrayal of the principles of the Sultanate of the United Kingdom, and the subsequent and very controversial actions of that government, which unfortunately will get censored and fact checked if we go into it too much here.
yeah.
Thank YouTube.
It's not, we can't go into too much detail on that. It's just too brutal for YouTube. And we might end up with a Wikipedia thing if we say too many true things. So we don't want to do that. We want to keep it friendly for the audience. So this is included within broader survey of Trym's work. Hate Monger underscores the range of subjects that captured the artist's attention later in life. Myth, folklore, realism, political anxiety, and speculative futures coexist uneasily within his canon. Now, this painting has some interesting history to it, or an interesting future, we'll say. It currently resides in a private collection in Germany. However, in recent years, several art historians have expressed concern regarding the long-term safety and shifting cultural and political pressures in what some have termed a new Germany. And proposals are recently been made to relocate the work to Venice for preservation, though that transfer has not yet been confirmed. And it really kind of, and scholars have also been quoted on this. The final word for it was that they think that it represents that Trym does not take sides, is that he records what happens when the sides collapse.
Fascinating
Yeah.
and very profound.
So with that, uh, we'll jump into his magnum opus, the Life Day celebration. Of course,
Oh, this is a amazing piece.
a fantastic piece. The colors, the characters, the dynamic nature of the work is just, it's so touching, and it really captures, you know, the spirit of his work, but also it captures something that speaks to all of us deeply inside, I believe.
It's maybe one of his most spiritual pieces.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Which is something that he agreed with himself. So we'll jump in and get there. So this is an oil on canvas, and most of the known reproductions, because he's done a few, of course, because he can't part with the original. Uh,
Hmm.
they measure generally about 20 by 25, which is reflected in that image that of the Sultan earlier. Of course, the original is much larger. And Life Day Celebration it's universally regarded as Trym's magnum opus. It's the work against which all subsequent efforts, his own and others, have been measured. The painting depicts the observance of Life Day, a ritual holiday conceived through extended discussion between Trym and George Lucas, and later
Hmm.
introduced to popular culture through the Star Wars holiday special that we all knew and loved as children.
Oh, I mean, it's truly the best of Star Wars.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, so it represents Life Day as not a spectacle, but a ceremony, as the figures gather in a moment of collective stillness, illuminated by the central glow of the orb there, and it suggests endurance rather than joy. And the composition deliberately echoes familiar winter holidays, and yet it kind of resists sentimentality.
Hmm.
It seems dynamic, even though it's touching to us. And the celebration is earned; it's not assumed. So it's again part of the ritual. And the parallels between Life Day and Christmas proved instrumental in shaping the holiday special, and an achievement Trym has consistently embraced with proud distinction. While critics have debated the program's legacy, scholars generally agree that its existence marks a rare instance in which Trym's private mythology briefly intersected with mass culture.
Hmm. I can see that, especially if you look at the a catalog of his larger works. Um, there is a true embrace of Saint B. Arthur for Trym,
Yeah.
and then his also predilection, and I know it's not covered in most of what we have, but he also really liked to have one really tall leather boot to be worn at all times.
Which, of course, like, well, because he's such a rich character that I couldn't possibly fit everything about Trym into an hour segment. I just couldn't do it. You know, I just
Agreed.
picked
Yeah, it's also something I hear he has in some more intimate settings when he's sitting down and chewing his nose with his upper lip.
So, uh, the original painting remains in Trym's possession, and he has repeatedly stated that he will never part with it. However, he did create and personally deliver a reproduction to the newly crowned Sultan of Lustanistan within the UK Caliphate. And the gift was made unknowingly because of Trym's reclusive lifestyle. It had largely insulated him from the political violence that preceded the Caliphate's rise. But notably, the version presented to the Sultan omits one element of Trym's original, and that is his prized foot goblin character. Even though there are hints of it there, it's not entirely included. And scholars really remain divided on the significance of the absence. Some argue it reflects practical constraints of reproduction, but others contend it was intentional, an editorial decision signaling that the recipient was not worthy of the work's most cherished figure.
Hmm.
So, unlike many artists, though, Trym has never attempted to surpass this painting. And in later interviews, more recent interviews, he simply stated that nothing warranted the effort. Some things are finished, he said. You don't improve them, you leave them alone. So today,
I,
Life
I
Day.
can see
Oh,
that.
yeah,
I really can. Yeah, it's something where once you behold the original, everything else is a pale imitation.
absolutely. And again, a cultural touchstone for definitely my childhood, and I think many people's childhood in modern day. And something that continues a celebration even today. You know, I mean, Life Day celebrations happen all over the world during the holiday seasons, and you know, we have Trym to thank for that.
Yes, yes, we do. I don't think the iconography would be quite the same. It's like Norman Rockwell with Santa. It's just never going to be the same.
No, yeah, I mean, he defined what it means. So the captured the spirit of it so well that again, you know, it's finished. You can't improve it. You just leave it alone. And he's very wise to recognize that. And
Indeed.
today, the Life Day celebration stands not only as the apex of his artistic output, but as a declaration of limits, of creation and ambition and legacy. And it's the work after which he chose not to compete, including with himself. So, because nobody could compete with this, such a brilliant piece. And yeah, so that is our that's our survey of Trym's works. We're right at our hour. I've got one other image of Trym with the uh, Trym meeting or an image of Trym meeting a sci-fi character, but this is of course totally fabricated. There's no authenticity to this like the other images. And
Mm.
yeah, but that is what we've had for Trym. And I hope that everybody listening has really been able to kind of, I don't know, be, I would say, inculcated into the cult of Trym in a way, in that you understand understand and really cherish his works and his contribution to wider society and culture and the artistic world instead in the end.
Indeed. And as Bobcat points out, Trym is the reason for the season. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think we need to make sure everyone has a very, very happy Life Day.
Absolutely. So yeah, and so with that, we're at our hour. And so I've been Dave, Fat Dave from Total Blackout Painting.
I've been Bleach Demon from myself.
And this has been the Autist Circle. Thank you and join us next week. Same time, same place.
Indeed. And remember,
Bye, folks.